the idea that we can be veiled in order to move deeper into love and deeper into relationships. Thank you for coming. Thank you for staying. I'm here to share with you the beautiful transmissions from the walls of my cavernous heart and to witness the great frequency shift that we are moving into as a collective and the beautiful deep work that we are doing as we glide into the age of Aquarius. This is the Liminal Frequencies podcast. Let's go. Welcome to the show. I'm Jillian Ribbons. I'm so excited about this episode today and wanted to see how everybody's doing, how the temperature is out there. It's getting warmer in the Pacific Northwest, which is really nice, getting some sunshine. And we're moving forward on this Mars retrograde thing. It has felt like I am in a room and everything's Velcro. I'm wearing Velcro. The walls are Velcro. And I keep trying to stand up and get out. And I keep getting pulled down by the Velcro. But I did recently connect with a friend who had this incredible Mars retrograde story. And it was actually a Mars in Cancer story as well because it involved her crabbing. And she said it was this initiation that she was put through by Mama Salish, her spirit of the Salish Sea here in the Pacific Northwest. She was crabbing on Christmas Day to catch some lovely fish for her friends for a gathering. And there was a series of mishaps, a series of events. It was a whole journey that happened, but eventually she ended up losing her paddle and she had to go into the water and tow her paddleboard back to land with all of the catch that she had. And she didn't anticipate how heavy it would be and how difficult it would be. But this was kind of her only effort to get out of the situation. And she was able to make it out of the water eventually. But this set off a whole adrenal response ordeal where she didn't go home and just kind of take a warm shower and recover. She thought that she was okay and she started doing a bunch of work. She killed the crab, she cooked the crab, she scrubbed the toilet, and as she's scrubbing the toilet, she's like, why is the toilet water so hot? This is so weird. My building has this weird issue with the toilet water. And after dinner, which was quite lovely, she went to bed and realized that something wasn't quite right. And so she had paramedics come. They kind of wrote it off, and she eventually did go to the ER and get treated for hypothermia. So this Mars retrograde in Cancer can be quite an initiation of us going to the depths. And yeah, for her, it feels like this really big shifting path. And I'll tell you my story as well about my Venus retrograde initiation story going into the underworld. But today we're going to unpack the story of Psyche and Eros. And I love this story. It feels so compelling in that we move and we weave from Venus in Pisces to Venus in Aries. And it's great. I know that we have our masculine and feminine that are so interconnected and so integral to our experience showing up on this planet. And now we are having both of these planets back to back, going retrograde, going through their own initiation journeys and allowing us to show up in different ways. And it's this cosmic play that's playing out right in front of our very eyes. It's so beautiful and yet so intense. And even if you're somebody out there, and we all have people out there who are not connecting to the astrology, they may not be connecting at a soul level to this time and their journey and their growth, even those people are still receiving an enormous upgrade in how their hemispheres of their brain work together and how their masculine and feminine side work together. So I want to read to you from the archetype deck, the card that I pulled from Kim Cran's The Wild Unknown archetype is the venom, the poison, the curse, the toxin. Much to our dismay, the venom is always lurking in the shadows in one form or another. Its toxic presence may be found in our relationships, thoughts, speech, or environment. Thankfully, the cycle of purification and detoxification comes so naturally that it is built into our every exhale. We breathe out CO2, and the plants return it to us as oxygen. Archetypal venom is rarely remedied as easily, however, and it can come in potent forms and quantities that are deeply damaging to us and to the world. When the venom card appears, there is a harmful substance in our psychic realm that must be identified. Perhaps your words have a sting of poison about them. Perhaps a relationship is slowly draining your reserves. Acknowledgement is the first step. Change is the second. The remedy will reveal itself in time, and with it, forgiveness. The spreading of the venom is like a chain reaction. When we strike others, it is likely we have ourselves been struck. Break the cycle. When you harm another, you harm yourself. Keep in mind this goes for our earth as well, with cosmic consequences. And isn't it so interesting how the feminine energy can become venomous if it is disempowered? And so I'm really looking forward to going on this initiation journey with you into the world and the depths behind the veil. So grab your astrology chart, grab your snorkel. This is Pisces season after all. We are going to dive right in. Hello, beautiful souls. So we're going to talk about this Venus retrograde. And Venus is one of the planets that rules Taurus as well as Libra. So if we look at the astrology wheel, which starts with Aries with the first house and ends with Pisces with the 12th house, we can see that Taurus is the second house, the house of self-worth, the land that you put your house on, and the beauty of nature. And Libra is the 7th house, which rules relationships and that aspects of Venus that affects how we relate to others and how we are when we're in our unity consciousness. And so this is a really interesting retrograde, and I wanted to explore down this rabbit hole of Greek mythology with Psyche and Eros. And this is because Venus is going to start in Pisces, and it actually already moved into Aries. Venus is going to go retrograde on March 1st, and then Venus is going to go all the way back into Pisces on March 27th and recover some of the territory that it's been moving through. And in that process, it's really wild because Mercury is also going to go into Aries a couple days after Venus goes retrograde. So it's going to join Venus there. And then Mercury is going to go retrograde on March 15th. And a couple weeks later, on the 29th of March, it will actually be in Pisces. And when Mercury moves into Pisces, it'll move us into the Aries eclipse, which is on March 29th. And it just feels like a lot. The astrology, sometimes my brain just gets flooded. And so that is why I want to share with you in story form in a way that we can relate to. What does it really look like for Venus, this goddess of beauty, of love, of aesthetics, of power, to go into the underworld and to revisit some aspects of her self and to rework and rewire some things, only to come out into a more direct, a more fiery planet. And then how is it going to all unfold for us? So wherever you have aspects in your chart that pertain to Pisces and Aries, that's where you're going to be affected by this. So if you have any planets in Pisces in the 12th house, for you, so if you're in Aries, you actually will have all planets in a linear way, where Pisces is the 12th house, Aries is the first house, if you're an Aries rising. But if you have another rising sign, it'll depend on where your rising sign is. So if you look at where Pisces is, that's going to be the area that you've already moved through and that it's not really ready yet. You have to rework it. So it's such a beautiful story, which begins with Psyche being this beautiful daughter of a king and queen, and she was revered by many. This brings us into the part of the story where Venus is in Pisces. And Venus is exalted in Pisces. I actually had to look this word up because exalted means they're revered, put on a pedestal. And this beautiful Psyche, she literally was put on a pedestal. She was seen as another Venus, another goddess. And although they thought she was beautiful and they started to abandon the Venusian temples in order to worship her, she was also just put on this pedestal, which was very lonely. And her two sisters had already found husbands, and she wasn't able to find a husband yet. So we're at this point of the story where we're seeing the ideals of beauty and the actuality of what it feels like to contain this beauty as being very different. And so Venus is a Roman goddess, but in this story, we're just going to use Venus out of ease of referring to her in the way that we're moving through an astrological story. Now, Aphrodite is the goddess of love, and that is who we're referring to here. And Venus's son is Eros. He's also known as Cupid in his baby form, but in his adult form, he is the mischievous god of love and romance, and he goes around shooting people with arrows and creating all kinds of havoc and shenanigans. And so Venus really doesn't appreciate that Psyche has been put on this pedestal and it's removing all of the intention. So she feels very jealous and she asked her son, Eros, to shoot her with an arrow and make her fall in love with the most horrible serpent beast. And so that is the way the story is set up. And we move into the castle of the king and queen and Psyche. Psyche means butterfly or soul or mind. And her parents are very concerned that she's not going to be wed. And so they go to the oracle of Apollo and they ask for answers. And the answer comes in the form of this horrible, foreboding tale of her being married to this awful serpent and it basically being like she's dead. And so they dress her all in black and she just requests to be taken to meet her husband. She's just doesn't want to put it off anymore. And yeah, it's very dark, facing death, facing the darkness, and moving into an unforeseen fate. And so she is taken to this hillside, and the songs are very grieving. There was a very happy spirit about her potentially getting married in the celebrations, and now it's been replaced by this sadness and grief and loss. And so she is taken down by a zephyr, which is a gentle wind, a beast of gentle wind. And she's taken down into the valley and she falls asleep on a bed of flowers. And she's actually quite surprised that she has a gentle sleep and she feels good. And she's in the sunshine. And she wanders into this place, and it's this castle. And it's clear that this castle and this life is for her. And there's all of these invisible maidens and invisible servants that want to serve her these delicious foods, and they entertain her. They play instruments and theater for her all day long. And they draw her a bath, and she has such a luxurious life. And at nighttime, her husband is Eros, and her husband comes and makes love to her at night and spends time with her, and then leaves during the daytime and goes off on whatever adventure that he is going on. So she isn't actually able to see him. And so this is really interesting when we think about Venus and Pisces, as Venus being blinded in a way. She has to look the other way, or she has to look through a veil. And I think it's very interesting that in traditional weddings, there is a veil, and the veil is pulled over the woman's eyes before her marriage. And when she is standing with her husband, I believe she gets to see to the other side. And so in Pisces, there is a sense of being veiled by love and being able to maybe go into a situation that we might not have gone into had we been able to see with full clarity. And the interesting thing for me looking back is I started a relationship during the last Venus retrograde to the day, like March 1st, 2017. And the idea that we can be veiled in order to move deeper into love and deeper into relationship, that we need to omit things from our eyes in order to fall in love. And it's interesting, wherever you have Neptune in your chart, if you want to look, Neptune rules this delusion. Neptune rules Pisces. Neptune rules the fantasy. So it can be a really beautiful, positive thing. And it can also be a way in which we aren't willing to look at things. So one example would be if you have Neptune in the third house, you might have some delusions when it comes to your family. You might not want to deal with your family, or you might be strongly averse to, oh, they're just crazy, I don't want to talk to them, or my siblings are just crazy. Maybe all of us have this, but besides the point, if you have Neptune in your ninth house, which rules higher education and learning, and maybe you're a Waldorf teacher, and maybe you have this magical reality that you live because when you were a child, teachers were so transformational. There was so much magic in higher learning or travel as well. If you are like me and you have Neptune in the fifth house, then you have delusion and magical thinking when it comes to dating, children, pets. And so this is, I'm sure they're all difficult, but this is a difficult one when it comes to really seeing in somebody what you want to see rather than seeing their true colors. And yeah, there's good things about this. There's reasons that we don't necessarily see all the details and get all the information. And that's why they say with retrograde, by the way, a retrograde is when the planets travel in a way related to the Earth that's kind of transverse, where you can't actually see the planet. And it appears that's moving backwards in astrology because of the relation and the way that everything's around. But it's not like it's actually turning around and going backwards. It just appears in our own limited perception that it is moving backwards. So it is definitely a time to review those contracts, especially Mercury retrograde is a good time to really carefully review those things. And yeah, for Venus in retrograde, it's a good time to review, what do you see in a partner? What do you want in a partner? How do you visualize and see beauty in your own life? And what do you really value? How do you want to spend your money and your resources? And so this can be felt for weeks, a few weeks before the actual planet stations retrograde. And especially people who are very sensitive, they can experience this and feel a shift already. And Venus is retrograde for about 40 days and 40 nights, quite biblical, as we might move into these dark night of the soul as we reevaluate what we value. And also, I have heard that starting a relationship during Venus retrograde can bring you into a place that you didn't necessarily expect. And it can possibly be that you didn't have all the details of the information available, or that you made a decision that wasn't going to be as true to reality as what actually occurred. And this feels somewhat true. It feels that as I glean this after almost a year of separation, this was a 7-year relationship, that what remained from it was this beautiful friendship and this beautiful playfulness. And the things that I was wanting, or the things that I thought I was getting as far as deeper intimacy, wasn't necessarily as present for me. And yeah, there was a lot of revealing, I believe, that you spend, 5 years, 6 years with somebody and you think that you really know them, but you really don't. It does take going through all of these tests and initiations, which that's going to be what our episode is about as we move into the second part of how Psyche went through this initiation. So, Psyche is in the height of Venus and Pisces. She's living the dream. She has this gorgeous husband, although she can't see him, but I don't think she cares at this point. And he comes to her at night. She gets all the beautiful things she loves. And then there's a crack and a fissure in the plan. And her sisters come to visit her. And her sisters just come crying and wailing. And she feels disturbed by this. And Eros says, I want to warn you that I believe that your sisters are bringing you towards this uncertain fate. And I know that this is going to be really harmful for everything, all the beauty that we have in this life here in this palace. And everything could come crumbling down if you interact with your sisters. And this was really hard for her. Trying to see beyond the veil and to see the grief of my sisters think that I'm dead or dying or being held in coercion against my will. And so the sisters come again, and he gives her some kind of blessing that if she really wants to, put a nail in her coffin, she can see her sisters, but 100% make sure that they never are allowed to see him, and that she doesn't divulge too much about Eros to her sisters, or that he's Eros at all. And the agreement is that she can't see him. And so this is a little unnerving, being in this place where you know that you're veiled and you know that you don't have the ability to break out of it. And so her sisters come by, and she always fills them with delicious meats, and she fills their laps with gold, and they go on their way. And she tells her sisters, these lies about how her husband is a hunter, and she describes her husband. And about the third time they come visit, they're very concerned with her, and they tell her that they're worried that she's married to a horrible serpent. And she starts to allow them to get under her skin, and she says, oh, well, I've never actually seen my husband face to face. And they're like, wow, that's interesting. Tell us more. And so in the third visit of her sisters, they're able to get under her skin and kind of trying to sway her mind. It's Venus retrograde. Venus is curious. What is beauty? And what is it that I really want? Do I really want to be married to this horrible serpent if I can't see him? Or maybe if you could see him. But he's beyond the veil. And so the sisters come once again, and they start giving her some advice, and they coach her through a plan. And the plan is to take an oil lamp in the middle of the night, pull the comforters back, and reveal with the oil lamp who her husband truly is. And when she sees that her husband is a horrible serpent, she's going to use a blade and sever his head. And she is able to talk herself into it. She's very tumultuous in her mind, and Should I go? Should I stay? Should I do this thing? And you can see the light of Venus moving into Aries in this time where she's actually ready to take action. She's ready to take back her power, her individuality in this. And so she pulls back the comforter in the middle of the night. And what does she see? But Eros himself, the most gorgeous, mind-blowing babe. And she sees him and realizes that she has not been lied to. This is, in fact, Eros. And he has a quiver of arrows, and she accidentally, it's a great play on words, arrows. And she accidentally pricks herself with an arrow. And she falls madly in love on top of being in love with him already. And she jumps on top of him, starts kissing him, and she's still holding the oil lamp in her hand, and the oil lamp spills on him, and he comes out of his slumber just shocked that she would come up with a plan like this. And he flies up to the top of the palace, and he says, I can't believe that you've betrayed me like this. I can't believe that you would do this to me after all that I've done for you. I spared you from the evil serpent, and I decided to take you as my wife, and then this is how you treat me? And this is interesting because it's very Scorpio to me. It's very, okay, you've betrayed me. That's it. I'm done with you. And this idea of the fact that she was married to a serpent, and she wasn't married to a serpent, but she was married to a god that did have some of this vengefulness and resentment building up from all that she's taken from him. And he flies to the top of the castle and he says, my absence will be enough of a punishment for you. And he flies away. And she is so devastated by this. She falls to the ground. And as she falls to the ground, the entire castle crumbles below her. And this is where we're going to take a pause in the story, seeing how we've made this journey, this initial part of Venus retrograde, and moved into new territory with Aries, moved into this territory. And at this point, I want to say that Venus is going retrograde because it is time to go into the underworld and reclaim through her initiation, her right and her worthiness of her husband that she has betrayed. And so there is a moment after this that she goes to the river and she tries to drown herself in the river, and the river will not take her. This is a very Venus and Pisces thing, going back into the retrograde, going back into Pisces, and going into this deep water of emotion and this deep water of love. Like, how could I have lost this thing that's so precious to me? This story definitely hit close to home for me when I listened to it, because I had just gone through this 7-year relationship. They always say the 7-year itch. They always say that you remake yourself every 7 years. And so who you were and who you started the relationship as is not who you are continuing it as. And so for me, for myself, I had my own Psyche and Eros experience where I thought what I saw was just the divine, beautiful intimacy that I always wanted. And once that started to fade away, and once just the complications of being in a relationship started to wear away at the soul of it, the intimacy, the love, that I started to wonder if it would be a good idea for me to open up the relationship for certain reasons. It had started to become something that I had heard a lot, and finding the intimacy that you need isn't necessarily the responsibility of the other person. So I did take that on to myself as the Venus and Aries energy goes. And yeah, but the veil hadn't really quite been lifted. And as I moved through this experience, which at first it was really helpful. It was really helpful to be seen by somebody else, to be loved by somebody else, and also to be seen by my partner in ways that he hadn't seen me before, that I was capable of this level of intimacy. Yeah, as things unfolded, as they do, as trust became an issue, as betrayal became an issue, as this scorpion energy in this relationship just held on like a tally to betrayal after betrayal of trust and intimacy. Then, when enough ammunition is available for the stinger to be pulled out, the stinger's pulled out, and just shows somebody who was really hurt and just couldn't continue with this anymore. And so, as we moved into this finalization of the relationship, I did feel a glimmer of intimacy, trust, connection in this relationship that I had never felt before. And it was as if the veil had been removed and I saw who this person really was. And in a way, it was too late for me. And so as I move into this Venus in retrograde in Pisces and Aries, I had just a lot of feelings of revisiting this experience and this relationship. And wow, I just can't believe that, we're going through this same chapter again and again. And another interesting part of this is, so this relationship started with Venus retrograde, March 1st. And on the 23rd of April, I was just so gung-ho about going outside and doing outdoorsy things that are semi-dangerous. And part of it for me was I had been for most of my 20s, or at least half of my 20s, which is just enough, been in a relationship that had proved narcissistic abuse and had just become really negative and wore on me. And being out of that relationship, I embraced life at a completely different level. And in a way, I threw myself into the Mars, which is my Mars is in Aries, very physical, very involved in hiking and biking and surfing and snowboarding and doing all of the things with your body that help you to move the energy, that help you to take action, and without the regard for the physical aspects of me that could be hurt. So this was the first of a few major injuries, not major as in needed to go to the hospital, but major as in taking some serious time for recovery. And I was rock climbing in Vantage at Frenchman's Coulee in Washington. And I just had this attitude. This was right after Venus went direct, but before Venus went into Aries again. And I was just very much in this masculine of like, let's just send it. Let's climb this. I'm new at rock climbing, but I was very confident. I had taken my first whipper fall, which is supposed to look like you're up on the wall and you put a clip in and you're pretty safe and you climb over it, and then you take a fall and maybe you fall 5 or 6 feet. And so this route had bolts that were spaced in an interesting way. And it seemed like none of my guy friends wanted to climb in the morning. I was like, okay, fine, I'll just go for it. I'm going to do it. And I climbed this route and I got to about the third bolt. The bolts were spaced out pretty good. And when I got to the bolt, I tried to clip it again, and the clip just kept on being rejected. And I was in a space where I should have climbed a little higher, been able to reach. But I remember a friend of mine saying, that's how you know that you're on adventure, is when some shit starts going down. And I said, oh, that's not the best thing to hear. Well, that's not the best thing to talk about while you're about to be on an epic adventure. And I don't remember it, but I fell. I remember being upside down only 4 or 5 feet from the ground. So I fell about 27 feet. And I was just, the minute that I got lowered, I realized that my ankle had took a really big beating. And what happened was I tried to clip it, just got frustrated, didn't get a chance to clip it. And when I fell, there was a lot of slack. And as there should be for somebody who's clipping, my belay partner was my partner, and he got pulled into the wall with his shoulder. Kind of didn't want to talk about his injury because I had a decent injury. And a friend of mine was a body worker, and she was telling me just to shake it out and just, making me feel really supported and everything. And I got a velocity concussion, which means that my head hit the side of my brain hit the side of my head without actually physically hitting my head that I remember or that I know of. And so I was a little loopy. There were some things that I said that didn't make sense. It was a little bit silly. But overall, neurologically, that wasn't a huge issue for me. I just know that I was really revisiting the way that I engage with my masculine and feminine energy at that point, and really giving myself a time out to just be with my emotions and my feelings, and to begin to process some of the stuff that had occurred the last 6 years before that, having been in this dysfunctional relationship, and reviewing the patterns that I had been in. So a lot of people say Venus in retrograde is not necessarily a good time to start a relationship. At the time, I wasn't really focused on astrology as much as I am, but I do believe that there is a huge revealing that could happen with moving through these different veils. And most likely, a lot is revealed about ourselves. The North Node and Venus and Neptune were all in alignment in Pisces. And this was on February 1st. And this is what seems like a really beautiful alignment. Venus and Neptune just being such a dreamy, lovely place. And the North Node, our destiny. And so I saw this a little different. And it is a beautiful alignment. I did have a beautiful day on the mountain, but I started to become aware of these patterns of the masculine, which Mars was in Cancer, retrograde. I started to notice these patterns and how it feels to be on the other side of that as somebody who's wanting a little bit of support, a little bit of masculine energy, and just feeling like I came up empty-handed, and really knowing more what I want and being able to move forward into this retrograde. And so it'll be interesting to see as Venus is going to cross the North Node again on the 1st of April. So nearly 2 months later, Venus is going to join the North Node. And it's interesting because we started this story with Psyche, and she has this destiny, which the North Node can be a destiny, and it's not always the destiny that we imagine that we're comfortable with. It's this strange destiny for her to marry a serpent. And she stepped into that destiny and stepped into that North Node. And we'll see what happens in the next part of the story as she finds the North Node after it's been upgraded by this cycle of Venus in retrograde. So it's been lovely sharing with you guys, and I would love to hear your Venus in retrograde story, how it's been moving through your life, how you're going to feel. And I invite you to stay tuned for the next episode as we move deeper into the story of Psyche and Eros and her initiation journey into the underworld as we do the same. Thanks for listening. I love how we can connect astrology and mythology, the human archetypes, with our own experience, and we can plug into it. And oftentimes we're on the same initiation journey. And if you're on an initiation journey yourself, I would love to help guide you. I do one-on-one journeys in the Akashic records. We can look at your astrology and see how that relates to your Akashic journey, and possibly you have some kind of past life story, some kind of lifetime where you were going down the rabbit hole into the underworld to prove your love to your husband, or some other mythological story that you're holding in your cells and your tissues. You know, the body keeps the score, and that's my favorite expression because, yeah, our tissues are holding on to this information even if we've long forgotten what's going on. So I had to look into the veil. I had to look beyond the veil and figure out why we actually use veils when we get married. And that is from Roman and Greek times. It was to protect the woman from evil spirits. So, yeah, this makes a lot of sense that the veil is where we can hide from those spirits. And oftentimes the veils were red, and this was a nod to Vesta, the goddess of hearth and home. And they were often saffron or red colored veils that they were wearing. So, speaking of the veil, I just opened this book, Psychedelics and the Soul by Simon Ugler. And what I found was the Medusa story. The Medusa story begins with violation. Of her challenge to Athena's beauty, not much is known. Hesiod is one of the main fonts of Greek myth, paints a picture of a carefree tryst between Medusa and Poseidon in a pastoral meadow. Yet the poet Ovid presents a much more compelling version of the tale. Poseidon rapes Medusa in Athena's temple, and instead of the powerful male god being punished for his deed, Athena punishes Medusa, a devastating familiar tale. The Medusa myth speaks to trauma on every level, from the individual violations perpetrated on women every day to the collective trauma inherent in living in a patriarchal or dominator culture, as writer Rianne Eisler puts it. I see three ways in which Medusa's monstrous condition and the lived experience of trauma survivors are intertwined. First, Medusa is robbed of agency. She certainly has no choice in her violation, nor does she choose whom she turns to stone. Medusa does not aggressively use her power to petrify, as Perseus would later do. One must look at her. Trauma robs us of agency by fracturing our ability to relate to the world in a coherent and consistent way. Instead, our choices become colored by what has happened in the past, our actions guided in ways that often continue this cycle of harm. He continues to speak about trauma and how it can isolate us. Trauma isolates us within its calcified walls, which also serve to keep us safe, but there's a cost. Trauma's petrifying gaze creates the antithesis of the very thing that might bring it healing. Instead of strengthening trust, trauma questions it. Instead of fostering safety, trauma disrupts it. Instead of building intimacy, trauma distances us from it. When looked at it this way, trauma can indeed seem like a powerful curse. In this Venus retrograde story, instead of being the one that's behind the veil, that's unable to see, she's actually the one that is turned to stone, that nobody can really see her essence and her beauty. And so now her beauty has been hidden in this land of Pisces, in this death and rebirth, as she becomes something that nobody actually wants to behold, that nobody wants to look at. So thank you for going on this journey with me through Venus retrograde, and we will be back to discuss the underworld with Psyche and Eros. Until next time.